just what happened to CJ Hicks in 2024 and why you shouldn't be surprised that he is changing positions in 2025. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching the #1 college football show, welcome. Thank you for joining us here. We talk college football year round, and that means we're in spring football right now, we're talking about these off-season moves, and we're talking about what, in particular, the Ohio State Buckeyes are doing this spring to prepare them for 2025. And first time that they're going to hit people in earnest is going to be when they play Texas, which ought to be just one of the biggest games of the entire season if it goes the way we think it could. This is potentially a matchup that we could see in the college football playoff, maybe even in the national championship, with two teams that not only made the college football playoff last year, but also played in their respective conference championships. And one of those two teams we thought was going to win the national championship once they got to the Final Four. Ohio State was able to get it done. But one of the players that we had been looking forward to seeing in 2024 was CJ Hicks. We thought that CJ Hicks was going to find a way into the starting lineup for Jim Knowles in that 4-2-5. Cody Simon having one of those spots locked up. But as things continued to go, Arvell Reese became the guy that we saw more and more at that second inside linebacker position. And because it's a 4-2-5, 4 down linemen, 5 defensive backs, 2 linebackers, it had just been difficult for CJ to get on the field at that position, which is kind of telling. It means that Arvell Reese is way better than I think many people thought he was going to be. And that CJ Hicks was willing to stick this out and wait and see is also telling. He also had 2 outstanding pass rushers return in JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, and that figures into it. So what's going on with CJ Hicks in 2025? Well, he is moving permanently to an edge rusher position. He's going to be that hybrid defensive end with his hand on the ground, which means he's in Larry Johnson's room, which is going to be a lot of fun because, again, while some of this comes out of necessity, not being able to break into the starting lineup or even rotate in at the 2 deep, it's also getting your best pass rusher on the field. CJ is one of the better pass rushers in the program, full stop. And with his length and his speed and his explosiveness, you expect him to be able to wreak havoc off that edge and to give Matt Patricia more of an opportunity to go with multiple fronts as opposed to a 4 down line front for the entirety of whatever game they are playing. And that is in trying to just make Ohio State a little bit more versatile against the kind of offenses that they're likely to see. The one that they faced against Oregon would not be the one they faced against Michigan. And having 2 different fronts might be able to help you with that, make you a little less predictable in your defensive scheme. So I think this is interesting because Larry Johnson Sr. is excited about it. As a matter of fact, the way that he put it in a story here recently with The Athletic was that it's a bonus, right? It's a bonus because Hicks can stay on the field. You can drop him in space, blitz him, and we can go forward. We'll try and build from that, but we can't build around just one guy. It's got to be early stages, and it's going to be hard. So this is the time for CJ to really work on using his hands at the line of scrimmage, right? Having those karate hands, how fast they are, is going to tell you a lot about how good an edge rusher or pass rusher is going to be. One of the things that I think was underrated about the great Aaron Donald was just how good and how quick he was with his hands. And this is something that CJ Hicks has been really, really good at teaching. I remember having this discussion with some of the pass rushers that have been tutored by Larry Johnson Sr. and say, he is going to get your hands right. You are going to be so fast and you're going to be so precise with where you're putting your hands down to this part of the offensive lineman's hand is where your fingertips are supposed to land. Being quick with that. And then having your one move, having your counter. If you got 2 moves in a counter, you are an elite pass rusher. If you can blow by people, you can be an elite pass rusher. This means that for 3 years, we've been thinking that CJ Hicks was going to lead this football team from that position of inside linebacker. Now, as a senior, he's probably going to lead that defense in a year of transition from that defensive line spot. I think more is going to be said about what that defensive line looks like later this year than not, because one of the things that we just kind of skirted around throughout all of this is it's going to be a little shallower at that defensive line position than it has been in some years past, just because you had guys come back with a lot of experience. Normally, that means that you're biding your time and you're going to build up what you got, but we're going to see a lot of guys that are playing for the first time. See a lot of guys that haven't really been in front of a crowd playing football, and that's one of the reasons the spring game was always important for big programs like Ohio State. You want to expose younger players to this new environment. It's not just about having the fans appreciate what you're doing. It's about having noise around what you're doing that is not just what's going on in practice. And there is a difference between a practice player and a game time player. Creating these game time situations is going to be so helpful for Ohio State. And to that end, while Ryan Day said, look, we're going to look more like an OTA in the NFL setting than we have in years past because we're just not going to tackle as often as we used to, we also still want to create an environment for our spring showcase, perhaps not a spring game, that is going to give these players that opportunity to play in front of people and to hear us as we're playing in front of people. Because it's one thing to be standing on that sideline. It's another thing entirely to be in the midst of it as it is happening. There is no preparation, I think, that is going to get you to where you understand and appreciate what it means to be playing in Ohio State, Michigan when the time comes. Most players will tell you the same thing. There's nothing I could do that prepared me, even though you're trying to do as much as you can to prepare. And that is the point, right? This is what spring football is about. Doing as much as you can to prepare for what the moment might bring. That's going to be huge. We know what we have in a Caleb Downs. I don't expect to see that dude in anything other than his skivvies when it comes time to look at what they're going to do on the field. Same thing is true of Jeremiah Smith. I think you're going to see more from the quarterbacks than you have in the past, but that's because they're in a battle where many people believe that Julian Sain is front runner. But I'm going to be watching guys like Arvell Reese, guys like Jermaine Matthews, guys like CJ Hicks, guys that I know can play, but I like to see a leap from them. I like to see a jump. I like to see how good they can be. The thing that I would also want to see more of is just how Matt Patricia plans to use his defensive backs, because that was a strength of what Ohio State was doing last year. Many people thought that Matt Gieri, Coach G, might have been the defensive coordinator for Ohio State had it gone another way. They tried to keep Jim Knowles. They couldn't get him. They tried to go to Kansas City to get a defensive line coach to take that job. They couldn't get him, and they ended up getting Matt Patricia. I think that Ryan Day has earned an opportunity here to really pick his defensive coordinator for what he wants to do. He's also got a lot of change going on in the offense. He's going to have a play caller that is not him for the second year in a row. This one's Brian Hartline, who plans to stay with the wide receivers, right? You're going to have a new offensive line coach. You've promoted your tight ends coach to co-offensive coordinator. You got a quarterbacks coach in Billy Fessler. I think he wanted to go pick someone that he thought he knew and was willing to work with Larry Johnson Sr. on what they're doing. And I'm going to do a little bit more about this later, but I think all of this is indicative of what you can expect from a guy that has coached offensive line, called offensive plays, called defensive plays in the National Football League. He's played a lot of man, played a lot of cover one, and that necessarily is not what you want, I think, because you're just not getting opportunities to blitz the quarterback as often as you would like. That's where a guy like CJ Hicks is going to come in. If CJ Hicks can demand double teams or demand chip blockers, or you can get that on your line of scrimmage, you can do more in the second and third levels. And that's one other reason it is crucial for Larry Johnson Sr. to develop CJ Hicks into the kind of pass rusher we think he is capable of being. He can be elite. He can be a guy that gets you 12, 15 sacks on his athleticism alone in a season. But if he can grow into being the kind of player that we saw from Nick Bosa, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, on down the line, my God, if he could be Chase Young, he won't be, but if he could be, that would be amazing. I think we're going to really like watching this defense play. If not, it could be really hard going for the Buckeyes, because that's the one thing you cannot miss on in the Big Ten. You have to have a pass rush. You have to be able to run stop. If you can do those things, you can win championships in the Big Ten. If you cannot, it's going to be a very, very long season for the Ohio State Buckeyes.